My name's Ian Pearson, and I've lived in Cliffe for about 28 years in a house called Reindeer Villas in Station Road, which is about 200 yards away from the old Globe Cinema. As a child, we used to spend quite a bit of time up near the edge of the cinema because my father had a garage that Wally Seal used to lend to him to keep his motorcycles in. In its demise, my dad had to get rid of the motorcycles, and the next thing you know, they were pulling the thing down. In the early 60s, I think it was probably about 1963, but you know, age plays strange memories on you. One of the things we used to do quite often was, my dad's garage was alongside the exit, which was the fire exit, which was quite high up in the air. And Wally Seal used to keep all the empty bottles there until a lorry backed in and picked them up. So as a kid, a few of us from Norwood Corner used to oik a few of these bottles out and take them up to Tom Besley's, the local shop, and try and get our tuppences and pennies back off the bottle to buy fireworks, which was a common thing down there. So yeah, I've been in the cinema, you know, quite a few times really as a kid. From about 5 years old, every so often, about every couple of months, I think, and I'm sure someone will correct me, they would have a children's film that was shown. So I think Bambi was one of them. I think there's been a few of them that I went to over that sort of between 5 and 10 years old. But by the time I got to that age, probably wasn't interested in the cinema at all. And then again, I don't think it was open anywhere near as often as it used to be. It got to a point where I think several factors changed. You know, there weren't current films being shown, and people could get on a bus and go into Rochester Odeon and watch film there. So I think that brought about the end from the end.
So did they have like a Saturday morning pictures?
This was in an early evening one, because a lot of those only ran for an hour and a half. So it'd be a 6 o'clock, 7:30, or it might have been a bit later than that. And that was a late night for me as a 5-year-old, because you're usually in bed by 7:30 in those days, you know, with a very more Victorian thought about when children should be seen and not heard. So yeah, it's a bit like that.
So do you have any like early memories of, what was your first sort of memory of the cinema? Can you remember at all?
Well, it was larger than life. I remember Bambi, if that's the name of the film, but it's stuck in my mind all these years. But sadly, and I'm sure you'll have a few more stories about it, is it poured hard with rain. And when it rained hard in there was only a corrugated tin roof, and it was like someone drumming on it. So half of the dialogues and stuff that went on, because he never used to stop, we used to drown it out. And if it was a real rainy night, me dad and mum wouldn't go up to it because you couldn't hear nothing at all. Yeah, so I'm sure a few people will mention that. But yeah, it was very strange. Big, funny, comfortable seats as a kid, I remember. That used to flip up when you stood up. So if you got up to see something or whatever and forgot, you used to slide down the back of the front of underneath of the cushion seat. So yeah, you only do that a few times. But yeah, it was a strange experience in its time.
Can you tell us some stories about your experiences in there, like stuff breaking maybe? Or...
Oh, blimey. Well, you never saw a film all the way through because the projection equipment they had, I don't think at that time, was capable of carrying the really big spools. So they used to have to stop and run maybe 2 or 3 spools because you had one with the adverts in it. I can't remember if it had two cameras or not, actually. I've been up there to the projection room over a period of, you know, when I was young, but it's because my dad was up there to talk to Wally. So, but I don't remember exactly what that was like at all. But I know for a fact it constantly broke down because the films had been around everywhere else before they ever got to the Globe at Cliffe. So, you know, if the current film was like, I don't know, Ben-Hur or whatever it was 10 years old by the time Cliffe Globe got to have it. Yeah, very different.
And of course that film's really long as well, so the amount of breakages and, you know, and the amount of hours you'd have to sit through that would be quite...
Well, I imagine it would have been on more and more spools, because the spools weren't very big, and then you get this clicking noise, and the sound system, and the numbers jumping past, and you know there was going to have to be a break again while he swapped the things over. You know, and I think a few people used to shout out, "Come on, Wally, get the bloody film going," or whatever, you know. Yeah, it was just there. It was like not knowing any different, and only ever going to Chatham Town Hall for a pantomime when I was about 8 or 9. Never went to a cinema.
So can you tell me and describe what the building looked like, the Globe looked like aesthetically?
Well, it was basically a bit of a pyramid, really. It was a proper, like an old warehouse, really. It sort of had a triangular pent on the top of the roof, and then a single-storey bottom, and inside it slowly climbed up towards the back where the projection room was. If I remember, you sit round the other way. The reception was at the front, up a set of concrete steps. And then there were 2 doors. There was one on the left and one on the right. I can't remember why there was 2 doors. In the middle there was a panel, which was solid at the bottom, that quite often had what films were going to be on. And at the top it was a glass window with this plaque in it.
Show us your plaque, please.
Right, this is the plaque that you'll see in lots of photographs of the cinema, and it says, "We have installed," and it's the company which you can just see in the middle, AWHSL, sound equipment in this theatre, and I've had it now for a few years.
How did you manage to get that?
Well, how I managed to get this was living at Norwood Corner and travelling to the 100 of Who school in the 60s. The bus stop that we used to catch the school bus from was right opposite the cinema. As they started to pull the cinema down, one of the last bits to go was the front facade. Everything else was brought into the side of the cinema where my dad's motorcycle was and the garages were. They pulled all the garages down, and the access to that was you used to turn off at Norwood Corner left coming into the village and almost immediately turn right again onto this big area, which also was a little bit of a car park, although most people in the village walked to the cinema. And so what they did was they sort of pulled it down from the back and loaded stuff into lorries actually, open lorries if I remember, and just cart the stuff away. So the very last bit was the bit at the front. And I was standing there one morning going to school, and I thought, blimey, there's nothing going to be left by the time we come home. What I might do is that sign, I've seen it loads of times over the years going to school, I might borrow it for posterity. And so couldn't take it to school, and luckily when we came back it was still there and the workmen were still in there, and I said, "Can I have that sign?" And they said, "Take what you like," basically. And that's what I did. So I took the sign home. My mum wasn't best pleased, and it hung on my bedroom wall for about 15, 18 years until I got married and left home. And then it's travelled with me wherever I've been since, really. And
it's the last thing that remains of the cinema.
I wouldn't think there was anything left of the cinema other than that sign. And I would think that probably it is likely that somebody might have, in the early days, had a seat or two out of it, but there was very little that was of any use. I would think the cinema equipment would have been sold off by Wally, because it was still sought after. People wanted to spare everything because these old machines were always breaking down. So I think that's where it went. The actual sound system, well, I would have thought that was chucked in a skip, because it wasn't something that you could put in your house. The columns on the sides of the cinema were big, so they would have gone the same way as nearly everything else, either recycled or thrown away.
So do you have any stories? Do you know Wally at all?
As a kid I remember him, yeah, he was a funny little guy. That's all I can sort of remember of him. I mean, a lot of the ladies in the village worked there as ushers, and I'm sure if you're lucky you'll be able to find some of them still alive. but they would have probably been in their teenage years, and I was 5. So they would now be in their late 80s and early 90s. Funnily enough, the steps up to the cinema from the road are still there, even though they built houses along in front of it and round the corner around it onto the where the car park and the old garages were. These bloody steps, concrete steps, are still there. And I remember as a kid, they were told they were big steps as a kid. You know, there were big jumps. I think there was only 4 or 5 steps to get up to the entrance to get in there. And the rail was there for a while. I think someone must have cut that down over the years. But in the middle of the steps, there was a rail that split up the left and the right entrances. So yeah, it was an interesting time that I've never put my mind to until now.
I know we pretty much covered it, but can you just sort of tell me what it was like on the last days of the cinema, really?
Well, the last days of the cinema, I think it was shut up for a long time. It didn't actually run as a cinema, and gradually became more and more dilapidated. I know it definitely, the land in the cinema was sold off, because I can remember my dad happened to remove his remaining bike at the time, a Veloset, and that went up there, gardening into the shed. The dates of that I can't remember, but I was definitely a teenager by then. So I would think I was about 13 at the time. So over that period, 13, if we can establish the date it finally was pulled down, but I would think I was 13 or 14 at the time. So I've had the plaque for 60 years, which is incredible, because most things I've had from that era don't exist anymore anyway. You know, toys and things like that have gone. So I don't know why I've kept it, really.
And make sure you always keep it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Go back hanging in my garage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll hang it up in the garage with my Cliffe and Hyam signs that have became acquired over a period of time. But most of my friends and family will all have gone there. I was speaking to my sister before this interview, Linda, because she's only 2 years younger than me, and she remembers going up there, but she would have only been about 5 when I was 7. She's 2 years younger. And she said she wouldn't be much use to your interview because she can't remember anything about it. So yeah, it will be people that are in their mid to late 70s that will probably have the best recollection. And yeah, there's not many of them left.
No, it's a shame that no other cinema really came about for Cliffe or the peninsula, really.
Well, it's like everything. And then the whole thing about the cinema and everything in Cliffe Village was revolved around the APCM cement factory. A big proportion of the people in the village would have worked in the cement industry at Cliffe. Also, if they didn't work there, they'd have been at Hyam working for Eurolite, which made asbestos sheeting and pipes and that sort of stuff. So a lot of them would have been living in that sort of area. The village had 5 pubs, as I remember. So down the bottom you had the Black Bull, then the Vic, then the 6 Bells, and you had another one which was out at in the cement factory itself. What was that called? It's gone out of my mind. God blimey, I've been in there hundreds of times. It's not there now, but there was 5 main pubs in the village. 2 working men clubs. One was like a village club in the middle, and then there was another one which was down Simon's Road, which was the proper working men's club. So there's a lot of people working, and the culture was, a lot more men would have a pint on their way home from work. It was a different time and a different era. And then, I don't remember the cinema being open during the week. I'm sure it was if they run special films, but generally it was only like matinee in the morning and Saturdays. Then there'll be a kids slot maybe somewhere else on a Saturday or even a Sunday early. So yeah, I'm sure someone will remember, or you'll find paperwork to show when the showings were. But there was always billboards outside, you know, showing what's going to be on next. I wish I'd have had a few of them as well. That'd have been worth more money than this whole sign. No, the cinema was, I think you took these things for granted as a kid, really. You relied on your parents to take you. I mean, I don't remember there being a kids club there, although there could well have been on a Saturday morning. But I was more into like trying to get on a motorbike and go down the marshes and rag around down there, like most of the kids of my era were. There was a motorcycle club that was formed by the local policeman and a couple of the other guys. And so Saturday mornings, we'd want to be down under the hill on the bikes running around when other kids were probably going to the pictures on the Saturday morning. So yeah, Barry Beck, PC Barry Beck. But other than that, no, I don't think I've got any other stories about the actual cinema. I think I just took it for granted it was there. I used to go up and meet my dad in the garage and go to pictures now and again. And yeah, I don't have any real other stories about it apart from the rain on the roof. And I'm sure there'll be a load of people you'll find that talks about that. Yeah.
They said about it in the summer as well.
Yeah, baking up like a radiator. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, all the windows, you couldn't open the windows up because all the sound would escape, so, and let the light in, so like, yeah, it was a sweat box. I'm sure people would talk about that as well.
And then said about that, because you were allowed to smoke in there, there became this thick
haze, a blue haze used to come down down the screen. Yeah, I remember that as well. Yeah, yeah. But everybody took that as being part of life in those days. Everyone smoked. And my mum smoked. My dad didn't. He packed up way before that, but my mum still smoked, and most of our neighbours smoked. So yeah, that was always going to be the case, because you could buy cigarettes in the foyer, I think, if I remember rightly. When you went in and get the tickets, they had cigarettes at the back. All the films promoted smoking in those days. Yeah. The actors smoked in the film. And then in the adverts that used to flick through, there would have been, you know, Will's Whiffs and Will's or whatever it was. You know, it was all about smoking. So they wonder why they got a generation now of my age that have got like COPD and lung cancer and God knows what. Because as kids, the fags were laying around indoors, you just take them out with your mates, 13, 14, 15, have a fag. No, the only other cinemas we used to go to was the Odeon in Rochester as I got older. Now the Odeon in Rochester was, I saw quite a few films there. I mean, when I get together with a load of people from my school days, we were talking just recently about what film stood out for you the most. And I went with a few friends, sadly some of them are no longer alive. And the film was called Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston. And of all the films I've seen before and after, up to today, I think in its time, that was probably one of the scariest films I've ever seen. And it wasn't X-rated in those days, you know, and it wasn't to the last drop-ins of the footage that you realised that they'd never left Earth at all. It was a brilliant, brilliant film. They've made several remakes. And of course, by that time, I was 16 or 17, and we used to go there quite a lot on a Saturday evening to the later show. And yeah, I've seen quite a few films in the Rochester one. Better sound system, the screen was good. I'm sure you could still smoke in there, but they had these huge extractors in the Odeon. But that was built up a hill as well. And we used to park the car round the back and then turn it round sideways so no one else could park in the last little bit of it, and then bump the car back round again and drive it out. Stupid things kids do. And that was the Odeon in Rochester. And I think the only other one I went to was the one in Chatham, which is also on a damned hill. I can't remember what that was. It was a theatre for a long time. I did go and see a pantomime as a kid in there. They did try to redo it a few years ago. Where else did we go as kids? Oh, the little theatre on the banks of Rochester.
Oh, the Medway Little Theatre?
It's Medway Little Theatre now. It was just called the Little Theatre. Used to go over the banks from the Rochester, from the Odeon at Bottom Star Hill. If you walk along the pavement, we got the piece that are called the banks. It went up and down. And on the second bank, about halfway on the high bit, is that theatre. And we used to see, a lot of amateurs, go and see a few amateur shows in there. One of my friends at the time doesn't live in this area anymore. He used to go, his mum was interested, and so he used to be dragged in to do little parts, He hated it. Like you do as a kid. Yeah, so they're the only cinemas we ever went to. I knew there was one at Cuxton, because once I started driving and getting about, it was on a crossroads, if I remember rightly, on one side. But I never went to it. Went to another house, which was Judge Dredd, who lived just down the other way. Used to have some parties there.
Judge Dredd.
Yeah, banned by the BBC. Yeah. If you look him up, you'll see what I mean.
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had 2 #1 hits, but never played on the BBC Radio 1.
When he lived in Rochester?
Lived in Cuxton.
Oh, Cuxton.
Yeah, and he with his first royalties, he bought this place at the crossroads down the road in Cuxton, and we used to go. Another one of my mates knew him from when he worked, and we used to get into some of these parties that were going on there. But the cinema was there. I remember it being there at that time. That would have been the late 60s, early 70s. But yeah, interesting times.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
That was brilliant.